Carroll McMahan resides in Fountain City. He's a special projects coordinator of the Sevierville Chamber of Commerce. Carroll is contributing writer and coordinator of Upland Chronicles, a weekly column featuring mountain heritage stories in the Mountain Press. In 2010, he organized and continues to coordinate the annual Rose Glen Literary Festival at Walter State Community College in the Sevierville campus. A native of Sevierville, he moved back to East Tennessee after 25 years in Nashville and for one entire summer in Glacier Bay, Alaska. For the past 7 years, Carroll has presented various heritage programs at Wilderness Wildlife here in Pigeon Forge. He periodically conducts walking history tours of downtown Sevierville. Carroll is a recipient of the 2012 Community History Award presented by the East Tennessee Historical Society and the Historic Preservation Recognition Award presented on behalf of the Daughters of the American Revolution, Spencer Clack Chapter. And of course, he is married to Miss Michelle Ngola McMahon. And I do believe I see Uncle Lem Ownby making his way around the corner. Big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Howdy. My name is Lem Ownby. Most people know me as Uncle Lem Ownby. I'm not everybody's uncle, but I guess they think I am. I'm called that by almost everyone around here. I live here in Elkmont, Tennessee. I've lived here all my life. And this same little cabin, I guess you'd call it, or shack, it's more like it, right here above where all those fancy people live. I've been living here since I was about 19 years old when me and my daddy built this house. And it just seems like as I get older, let's see, this is 1983, get close to Christmas time here of 1983. And if I live to February, I'll be 95 years old. And so I've done a lot of living, and I've done it all right here. And as I said, most of it right in this one little cabin. But it seems like the older I get, the more people seem to be wanting to hear my story. Now, I never was one to talk that much about myself, but since you're here and I'm here today, I'll just tell you a little bit about, not that it's all that interesting, but some of these reporters and the like that's been coming around seems to think that it is. So I'm going to just tell you a little about, if you don't mind, I'll sit down here in my rocking chair. It's where I sit most of the time. And I'll just start back at the beginning. You'll have to excuse me. I do chew this backer. So I have to empty out every now and then. So just bear with me. And please don't ask me anything for a while. I'll give you a chance after a while to ask me some questions if you want to know something I hadn't told you about, unless it's too personal on me, and then I might just tell you it's none of your business. But as I said, I was born right here in the Little River Valley. That's what we called it. The word Elkmont never been heard when I was born. I was born on February 27th of 1889. And this was just woods and a few little cabins back then. Nobody had ever heard of such a thing as a national park or anything like it. It was just a mountain place, very isolated. It was 7 miles down to the Sugar Lands, and there wasn't no cars back then. If you went, you walked. And we went, but we had to walk it every time. But this is where I came into the world. Actually, about, I'd guess, the way the crow flies, about 3/4 of a mile from here down to the Wonderland Hotel sits there now. And I was born in a cabin just behind the Wonderland Hotel. The hotel wasn't there then. My pappy owned the property. But that's where I came into the world. I was number 7 out of 9 kids. So there was a lot of them born before me. And one of the most interesting things that ever happened to me, you might find this hard to believe, it happened the very day I was born. Now, have you ever heard of someone dying twice? Well, when I go the next time, it'll be twice. Because on the day I was born, the granny woman, as we called her, some people say midwife today, but it's a granny woman. And she was there to help my mama through childbirth. And there were other people around, and the granny woman came out and told the family sad news that the baby didn't make it, that I died. And they laid me out there on a little table. Well, you know, there wasn't many people up here, but word could sure spread fast in Little Valley back and then. It's no time till all the kinfolk and everything was gathered in, and they were talking about burying me the next day and all the things you talk about at a time like that. And my uncle, Lem Ownby, same name as mine, and you'll find out in a minute why, was sitting there close to where they had me laid out, and all of a sudden he said, "Somebody better tend to this baby. It's breathing." Well, all the commotion started. The whole household was just in uproar. And they grabbed me and they held me up and they shook me and they hit me on the back. The granny woman had pronounced me dead, had already collected her 50 cents and left. And much to her surprise, later she heard that I was still living and doing just fine. But anyway, because of that, they named me Lemuel Stewart Ownby. Now, Lemuel Stewart, by both his name and mine, have been spelled, I can't tell you how many different ways over the years. Lemul, Mumll, and Stewart's been spelled about as many ways. And there's a reason for that. Neither one of us could really read and write that good. And would tell people our name, and they'd just write it down ever how they thought it should be spelled, so it wasn't always the same. But anyway, I never was called Lemuel and never was called Stewart. I was always just Lem, Lem, Lem. And we grew up there. Another brother and sister came along after me, big family, and got along just fine. There wasn't much of a way to make a living back in the Little Valley back in those days. There's this newfangled word they use now called subsistence farming. Now, I'd never heard that till a reporter come one day and said, "Oh, you were just subsistent farmers." And I said, "Well, I guess, if you say so." But anyway, that's what we did for a living. They grew all their own crops and a lot of hunting and killing game and eating it. And bear was a popular meat back in those days, so you ate a lot of bear meat growing up. And bears were plentiful then. They're not so plentiful in the mountains now, but they were back then. And as I got a little older, I'm not sure when it was first discovered that we all had it, but every male member of my family had this eye disease. Now, there's a big, long name for it, but don't ask me what it is because I couldn't tell you. But some doctor in Germany gave it a name long after we all knew that we had trouble with our eyes. And it's something that you inherit from generations before you, and it's the male heirs that have it. So we all dealt with it, some worse than others, but the time I was just a kid, 7 or 8 years old, my mama used to tell people that I would just split right through a mud hole and not even know I was going to step in it, that I just couldn't see that well. But I learned to live with it best I could. So did my brothers and my uncles. It was just something the family dealt with, and none of us could see worth a hoot, but we just did the best we could. Well, when I was a young boy, there was a man by the name of English, last name English, from Knoxville. And he came up here and he bought some property around here close. And he bought it for one reason: he wanted the lumber off of it. So he built a sawmill and some splash dams on the little river over here and started logging. Now, he didn't have a very big operation. It was just a small little thing. But his little sawmill caught the eye of the man by the name of Colonel Townsend, who had come down here from Pennsylvania. Well, if you've ever heard of the town over here, Townsend, that's who it's named for. That's where he settled. But he just started buying up property all over these mountains. Anyone that would sell, he'd buy. And, these were poor people, and to be offered a good price for their property, a lot of people take it. I wouldn't have sold him mine for $1 million. But my daddy did give in. Colonel Townsend offered him a deal to give him a good price for his property and suggested that he knew where some of his own relatives had a little farm for sale, talking about this very place. So we sold the farm there where I was born. I call it a farm. It was a little patch of property. It wasn't much. What we got here, these acres, I think there's around 28, if I'm not mistaken, here was a lot more than what we had. There wasn't no house here. So, of course, first thing Colonel Townsend did is tore that house down there. He had other plans for this area. And he, just bear with me a second, I'm getting old here. I did okay till I was about 92, but I began to slow down a little bit now. We had to have some place to live on this 28 acres. We couldn't just sleep out in the rain and the snow. So we built this little shack of a house here ourselves, mostly me and my daddy, and other kinfolks is in and out helping us. And we built it up the best we could. And I'll admit it's a little bit drafty in here sometimes in the wintertime, but it's been home for a long time. And since way back, let's see, I'm 90 now, I was 19 then, so you can do the math on that. It's been a spell. But anyway, we moved up here and we built the house and we built a barn and we started an orchard and we had a pretty good life. By the time we moved here, my older brother and sister was already married and moved out, so there wasn't as many of us left. And the girls started marrying really fast after that, and first thing you know, it just down to me and Mammy and Pappy, and we lived here. Let me tell you a little bit about my Mammy and Pappy. They were just some of the best people on this earth. My Mammy was a Watson, and her daddy was David Corn Watson, and he was an old Civil War soldier, and a lot of them fought together in the Civil War. And her mother would pray every night in front of this picture that I have hanging here over the mantel, and pray that they all would be sent home safe and sound. And they were. Now, the way my mammy told the story, other people said she was off a little bit, but she said they all come walking back in the same day, all 7 of them. Now, that could have been exaggerated over the years, I don't know, but that's the way she told it, and I'm sticking to it. But they married, and she was from down closer to Gatlinburg, and moved up here, and they had a long, good life together up here. They were awful good to me. By the time I was a grown man, my eyesight was getting pretty bad. It gave me a good excuse. I never did care much about school to start with. And I just tell them I couldn't read well enough to do any good there. So I went now and then for about 4 years. I never did really learn to write worth a hoot. And I never could read just because I couldn't see. People say this to me all the time now, what in the world do you do here? There's no television. You can't read. What do you do all the time? But I live a pretty good life. I'm pretty happy here, so I don't want anybody trying to change that. I like it just the way it is. But you know, as I did get older and I realized that Mammy and Pappy wasn't going to be around forever, and all my brothers and sisters had married off, that I needed a companion. But you know, there was something that happened here in this neck of the woods. First of all, they didn't call it River Valley anymore. They called it Elkmont now. They changed the name to Elkmont. There was a bunch of men from Knoxville and the Elks Club that came up here and started hunting. This was long about the time English first came here, or maybe a little bit after. And they named it Elkmont because the Elks Club bought some property and had a little lodge up here for hunting. And a lot of people today think it's called Elkmont because there used to be elk up here. The only elk ever up here was those two-legged ones from Knoxville. There was no elk in Elkmont. But anyway, by the time Colonel Townsend come and started buying up property, and as soon as he'd buy it, he was cutting down every piece of wood he could find. The lumber was going quick and just leaving this place ugly. It's just terrible what he is doing. Today, I think people try a little harder than they did then, but then they were just interested in what money they could make off of the lumber and didn't care how they left it. And it'd rain hard after they had clear cut a piece of property, and water just run down, the soil would be washed away, and it was just an ugly sight. But anyway, it did give a lot of jobs for a lot of people, because jobs were hard to come by. And there was more jobs than there was men that lived right around here. So times were hard back then. Men started coming from all over to work for Colonel Townsend. And the Little River Lumber Company, as it was called. And they built these big things they called dorms, and single men would live in them, and they had places where married people could live, and they brought in these little houses called shay houses they brought in on the train. That's another thing they did. They had a train tracks laid, and the train started coming in because they had some way to get this lumber out of here once they'd cut it down. And it was a long haul into the market with that lumber. So they built the railroad all the way up, and they kept going up and up. And first thing you know, everything was clear cut around here. And they kept going higher and higher and higher up the mountain, cutting down lumber. Until, of course, one day it got to the place there wasn't any more lumber left. But I'll get back to that story in just a minute. I was going to tell you about how lonely I was getting. And, you know, these men coming in to log up here, they were courting all the women just like the local boys was, and it's hard to find a girl. And I was just looking desperately for one, and I had this friend that told me that there was a woman about my age. I was close to 35 years old by this time, that lived down in the Glades. Now, the Glades is clear on the other side of Gatlinburg. Now, the way everybody drives around today, that's not far, but back in 1924, that was a healthy walk, I tell you. But there wasn't no church yet up at Elkmont. They built one a little bit later than that. And there wasn't no church in the Glades yet. So Gatlinburg, it's called the White Oak Flats back then, was where people had to go to church. Now, I'll be honest with you, we didn't go that often because it's too far, but every now and then we'd load up and go down for Sunday meeting. And sometimes they'd have evangelists that come up here and have church somewhere, and everybody went then when it's close to where it wasn't that far to walk. But anyway, it's told me about this girl that lived in Elkmont, or lived in, I told you it's getting old, that lived over in the Glades, and her name was Jemima. And I said, well, what's her last name? And he said, Ownby. I said, Ownby, that's the same as mine. Well, turns out she was a little bit akin, but it was far enough off in the mountains till it didn't matter. There's a lot closer kin than that hitched up around here, let me tell you. And they say if you marry someone too close a kin, that they won't have any sense. And there's a lot of people running around here without much sense, so I guess that's true. But anyway, people called her Mommy. And sure enough, I think if you figured up, we were about fourth cousins, something like that. It wasn't too close. We'd never seen each other in our lives. Well, my next question was what she looked like. And the fella that's telling me about her said, what does it matter to you? You can't see. And I said, well, I can see well enough to know if she's pretty or not. And he said, I'll tell you what we do. I'll drive you down to Gatlinburg. She'll be at church down there on Sunday because she goes. And when she comes out of the church, I'll point her out and you can take a look at her. So sure enough, next Sunday morning, we got up early and went down, waited for church to be over, and she came walking out, and he pointed her out, and she didn't look bad at all. Well, the next thing was, how am I going to approach her? I went on back to Elkmont, she went on back to Glades, never had met. So the postman came by about once a week, and I was telling him about my dilemma, and he said, well, send her a letter. And I said, only one problem, I can't write. And he said, well, there's folks around here that can, get them to write it for you, and you can tell them what to say. Well, I found a sister-in-law who could scratch out a letter pretty good, and she helped me along with what to say because I had never done no courting. I didn't know what to say. So we sent her a letter. Well, you know, the postman just comes once a week, and then the postman don't get the Glades till about once a week. Well, it took a month, me just standing on my head every day, before I heard back from her. And she wrote, and it's a pretty encouraging letter. It encouraged me enough till I sent her another. And this went back and forth till I decided I'm ready to meet her. And I put that in a letter, or had it put in a letter. And we agreed, and I got me away all the way over the Glades to meet her and meet her family. Her daddy had died back in an accident back when she was just a very young child, and it had a very rough time growing up. But anyway, it was a fine family of people, and you know, she was 35 years old too, and her mama was thinking she's never going to get rid of her, I guess. So she is all about it. She is just all about it. So we went into Gatlinburg, not that same day, but pretty soon after that, we went into Gatlinburg, and a preacher with the last name Ownby married us. And now, keep in mind, Mommy had never been to Elkmont in her life. Like I said, it wasn't far, but it's a long ways back in those days when you walked everywhere you went. Well, she expected, I guess, that it'd look a lot like the Glades, you know, the mountains and the streams and the birds and everything. Well, when we got into Elkmont, she started looking around. All this land was clear cut, washed out. It was pitiful looking, I'll have to say. I'd never seen such a sad look on anybody's face in my life. I'm sure she was thinking, what in the world have I done? But anyway, we went on up to the house, which is a little bit past where it looks so bad. And she moved in with my mom and daddy, and she loved them both just like I did. And that's where we lived all of our married years, right up till the end of her life. She died a few years back, and oh, do I miss her. But anyway, I'll never forget that look on her face the day that she first saw Elkmont. And I guess a lot of other people felt that way. A little hard to believe now when you look around, it's all green and pretty again, but sure wasn't like that back then. But I got me a job. Well, I had a lot of jobs, to be honest with you. I ran a little mill. I had people would bring their corn and what have you to me, and I'd grind it for them for a fee. And people said I charged a little too much. I hate to admit this, but some of my own family would tell their kids when they'd send them to get their meal ground, now, don't go up to Uncle Lem's, go over to Uncle Levi Trenum's, because Uncle Lem will hold a gun to your head. He'll charge you too much. But I tried to make every penny I could. I'll admit that. But I got a job for the Little River Lumber Company and went to work for them. And I can't say it wasn't hard work. Oh, it's hard work. Back-breaking work. But it paid good. It paid better than anything we'd ever had. Not only did the men folk find jobs there, some of these big shots that run the company were living up there, and they would hire the women folks to come in and clean house and do domestic jobs. And so both the men and the women could make some money. So it was a good thing. Well, I didn't stay with it too many years. First of all, my eyesight sure didn't get any better as the years went on, and they had me operating a piece of machinery. It'd work about 10 minutes and it'd stop. It'd work about 10 minutes and then it'd stop. It's just enough to wear me out. Finally, one day, I just picked up my lunch box and said, if this is the best you can do, I'm going to the house. And I never worked another day for them. I found other ways to make money. I'd always been interested in bees, and I had a few bees, and I'd said, I'll just get some more bees, and I'll sell honey. Now, if you look out here in the yard, right by the coal bin, you'll see my bees. People are a little bit surprised sometimes that I can still rob the bees, as blind as I am. They call me legally blind now. I have a hard time seeing you. I can't tell you if that's a woman or a man or a dog or a cat right there on the second row. That's how bad my eyesight is now. But my hearing's good. I can still hear, and that helps a lot. But Colonel Townsend had wore this land out, just wore it out. So I guess he's wanting rid of it. And it just so happened that the U.S. government was wanting to buy it up because they wanted to establish a national park here. Well, none of us knew what in the world a national park was at that time. But boy, we was going to find out. They started buying up land, and my guess is if they'd have had to depended on just little farms like what I've got here, they never would have got it done. But these people like Colonel Townsend had big patches of land, and they'd already raped it, so they were ready to sell it. And so they sold it at a good price to the government, and which was a good portion of what became the national park. There were others in other parts, the Champions and different ones who had done the same thing to the land and sold it as well. So then they started buying up all these little pieces of property. Well, long about the same time, the people from Knoxville that had money had seen how nice it was up here in this area. And, it bounces back fast once they quit cutting down trees. New growth starts, and starts greening up and it starts looking pretty again. And these people from Knoxville had money, built little summer cabins, they called them up here. They were pretty fancy looking to us mountain folks. You know, they weren't bad little cabins, but they just sit all close together right in a row, and they had this Appalachian Club, they called it, and they'd buy a little piece of property just big enough to put a cabin on. And they'd come up and they'd stay all summer. Well, it was a pretty good thing to have nearby as a neighbor. Not all mountain folks were that lucky because they needed, the women all wanted help, wanted women folk to come in and work to help with the ironing and cooking and all that stuff. The Wonderland Hotel had this big dining room. They want not only people to work it, but they wanted us men to go hunting and provide the meat for the table. So I made a lot of money hunting bears and bringing them to the Wonderland to sell, and turkeys and just any kind of game that I could find, and they bought it up. Now, some of my relatives and friends that had better eyesight than I did would lead hikes. These people with money would pay to be led on a hike. Can you believe that? They paid somebody to take them on a hike. This old guy, Sam Cook, he's a distant relative. He led a lot of those hikes. He just led a lot of them. Well, one day, he took a group of these fancy women, and they dressed up fit to kill to go on a hike. It would tickle you to death. But anyway, Sam led them on a hike, and they left the Appalachian Club. They had their little lunches packed and gone for what they thought would be a day. Well, it wasn't no time till they came back, and you could tell every one of the women was in a huff. They was mad about something, and they went left and they went right, and they took off. And one of the fellers around there looked at Sam and said, "What in the world happened?" And he said, "Well, you're not going to believe this," but he said, "We saw some bear scat out on the trail, and they asked me what it was, and I just told them." Evidently, they never had heard the real word for scat. But anyway, a lot of things happened like that with the mountain folks. We got along good, but sometimes there was a little bit of communication problems with all that. But anyway, the government started buying up smaller little farms, and a lot of folks were tickled to death to sell their farm. And, you know, they thought we could move to Knoxville, or we can move to Maryville, or we can move to Sevierville, and we can buy a little place with this money, and we won't have as hard a time making a living. That's what they thought. I guess they just didn't think about what they was giving up. I just didn't want to give this peaceful place here with the river or the creek, the Jade Creek running right beside my cabin, and the tranquility that I had. I didn't want to give that up. Well, I thought I was going to have to there at first. I didn't think I was going to have any choice. But I heard that these summer people that I told you about was working out deals. They was getting a lawyer, and they was working it out to where they could have a lease, a lifetime lease, they called it. And they could stay there the rest of their lives on the property and get a portion of what they'd got for it. And when they went, then the property would go to the national park. Well, I thought, if they can do it, I can. So I hitched me a ride to Sevierville. Went this lawyer, they called him Judge Payne. I think he had been a judge for about a day or two, but he was a lawyer. And he said, "Yeah," he said, "I've done this from other people. I can work it out." But he said, "No, I'm going to warn you, once this park comes in, a lot of these things you've always been used to will be gone." He said, "The church, it'll be gone eventually, the stores and all that." And I said, "Don't bother me. I was living here before they come. I can stay after they're gone." And So I managed to work it out. And it was called a lifetime lease agreement that I could live here as long as I lived. Well, I guess I was around 50, somewhere around that at the time. And I'm sure the government thought, well, he ain't going to be around much longer. But it's 1983 and I'm still here. But anyway, it's been just a wonderful, wonderful life living here. Of course, my mammy and my pappy, they went on years ago, no longer with us, and it got down till it's just me and mommy. Never had any kids, but oh, did we have a lot of nieces and nephews. One of mommy's favorite things in the world to do was cook for the nieces and nephews, and they come to visit. And you know, people today have small families, and if your nieces and nephews come, it's one or two. Well, it was 6 or 10 back then. There's a lot of them that come, but we was more than happy. We'd make pallets on the floor, and they'd sleep out in the yard, and they loved the bees being around and the apple orchard and everything about it. So we got a lot of pleasure out of them. And now let me tell you something I did. Once the women folk had all married off, and Mommy was getting, well, I did this before I met Mommy. My sisters had all married, my mama was getting too old, and it was, they had always been the ones that carried the water in. So I rigged up this system, went out to town to Gatlinburg, the hardware store, bought some galvanized pipe, and ran that pipe from the spring up here on the side of the mountain. Oh, I'd say about 300 or 400 yards. I couldn't tell you exactly how far. And run those pipes all the way to my back porch. Put a plug in the pipe. When I unplug it, the water flows just fine. Oh, that same hardware store, I bought an old Ringer washing machine, put it on the back porch. It come time to wash, pull it over, fill it up with water, and wash the clothes. No more going down to the creek to wash clothes. So that little invention I come up with helped life a lot. I don't know if Mommy was so disappointed when she saw the place. I don't know if she had stayed at all if she had had to done that. But I was always proud of myself for that. But, you know, time moves on and we get older and things change. And as the years went on, it got quieter and quieter. But there were always, I was lucky in a lot of respects. I had a lot more visitors than some folks would have had because we was close to all these summer folks down here. They still needed bear meat, but it was illegal once the park was established to hunt up here. Well, I pleaded ignorance so many times that the park ranger finally said, the next time you're going to jail. So I had to be very careful, but that was hard on me because I'd been a hunter all my life. I had just always liked to hunt, and the money got till it was good, so I really hated to give that up. And I thought, well, it's either give it up or jail, so I finally decided I was going to have to give it up. But many a time I've went out hunting with different relatives in my family. One of the funniest things, well, everybody thinks it's funny at me, but I was out hunting one time, and I treed a bear up in a tree. Well, I thought I'll just lay down here and aim my gun and I'll get a good shot. Well, about the time I aimed, the bear answered a call to nature all over me. And my nephew Steve that's with me, he laughed so hard he rolled. And he said, I said, don't you ever tell this on me. And he said, are you kidding me? I can't wait to get back to tell it. And I said, well, you know, I've seen a lot of things, had a lot of things happen to me, but I've never been shit on by a bear before. But things like that happen and life goes on. And we always had, sitting around on the porch, we always had so many good tales to tell. And I didn't ever bring that story up, but everybody else did, so it went around and around and around. Another story we used to like to tell about was back in the logging days, and there was this man that was logging there, and he had somehow met this girl that lived over closer to Cades Cove. People would walk a long distance back then, and he was wanting to court her, and she said, well, the only way I can court you is to sit with you at church. And she went to this primitive Baptist church, and she invited him to come. And well, he was excited to death, but she told him, she said, now we're primitive Baptists and we have foot washings, and so we'll be having a foot washing. Well, on Saturday night, after he had worked all week, he cleaned up. He went down to the creek and he washed his feet real good, and he laid all his clothes out. Well, all the men that were batching it there with him, they that we're going to pull one on him. And they took his socks that he had laying out and poured them full of coal soot, just poured them full, and he didn't know it. Well, he got up the next morning before daylight. You had to get over there in time for church. Put them socks on and took off for church. And he was just proud as a peacock sitting there with this girl he had such a crush on. And it came time for the foot washing, and the men got on one side and the women got on the other side, and they'd take turns washing each other's feet. And he had washed this old feller's feet, and he had to pull his socks off then. And when he did, he looked down, and his feet were just as black as tar. And he took out the side door in that church and never went back. But them things happen sometimes, and that the kind of entertainment, I guess you'd say, we had. Another thing that just I find so funny is we always had lightning bugs around here. Always did, and they'd flash on and off, and we didn't think anything about it. Well, all of a sudden, this one woman that lived over here at this amongst the summer people, she read this article about these fireflies. They called them over in Africa, and that they were what they call synchronized. And she realized, well, we've got those right here in Elkmont. Well, she made such a big deal out of it and got so much talk about it. People just come in droves now to see them lightning bugs every year when they mate. And I guess, we didn't pay no attention to it, but I guess it was going on all the time, and we just didn't know it was anything extra special. It just happened. So it's funny what outsiders notice that we never did notice. There was a woman that lived up the way, well, she didn't live up here, but she had a summer place, and she didn't like living down there with all those society people. She had her own cabin. Her name was Maina Avett, and she lived about a mile on up the creek here, or had the cabin up there. She bought it from one of my uncles, as a matter of fact. And she lived up there with no bathroom, just like we all did. She just really enjoyed it. And she would get her paintbrush out and paint some of the most beautiful pictures you've ever seen. In fact, she painted one of my sister-in-law's breaking beans one time that I hear's in this big art museum somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but she really did well. And she would find beauty in things we just always took for granted. So we just learned from each other. And some people think that, I don't know, that we didn't get along, but that's just not the case. And same way with the Park Service. Now, I'll be the first to admit I miss my hunting, but we've come to an understanding. The park rangers look out after me, and it all works out. They've even allowed my nephew to put his house trailer right down here, and him and his wife lives down there now, and they can check on me. She cooks meals for me far more than I need to eat or want to eat, and looks out after me. I still sell my honey and put back every penny I can, to live off of. And I've done okay. When Mommy died, that was hard. And the last little while we had to put her in this nursing home down in Knoxville. And me not driving, being so far away, I was lucky to get somebody to take me once a week. And that went on for close to a year, and that was a tough time. But when Mommy died, I had made her a promise that I would not bury her up here in what they call the Levi Trenum Cemetery at Elkmont, because she had that one request from the far back as I can remember. Once the park came in, she said, when I die, don't bury me in no national park, because they care more about bears than they do humans, and I don't want them bears digging up my bones. So I couldn't bear to bury her up here, even though my parents were here and a lot of my folks. So some of my relatives, cousins and what have you, had moved down to Wares Valley when they had to leave the park area. And in time, they even let them move the church. It used to be up here down there, and they renamed it. Instead of Elkmont Church, it was called Valley View Church. Well, they had started a little cemetery there on my cousin Boss's property, and I thought, well, I'll just take her down there and put her there. And I did, and I put my own rock there. And someday soon, I'll be joining Miami down there. And at my age and the way I've been feeling lately, it probably won't be long. But as I said, if I make it till the 27th of February, I'll be 95 years old. And you can't ask for much more in this life. But I could ramble on all day, tell stories, and anything I'd tell would be the truth the best I could remember it. But I'm going to shut up now. And since we're all here and you've been so quiet and listening like I was an interesting character or something, I'm going to, well, let me tell you one more thing here. And then I'll let you ask me a few questions. And we might just stay till they run us out of here. I have a feeling that ain't going to be long. But anyway, when, let's see, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, I'm just going to open it up for questions now. And this lady right here on the front row has a question for you.
How old were you when you died?
I didn't make it till 95. The day after Christmas in 83, I walked out and it had snowed just a little bit, and I slipped and fell. And they took me all the way to Knoxville to Fort Sanders Hospital, and was getting a little better at first, and then I had a stroke on the 16th of January. I died a little over a month before my 95th birthday.
I bought honey from you.
You bought honey from me?
Honey.
Best honey you ever ate, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
You got a bargain. Sure did. Yes, sir.
Now, didn't a couple of Supreme Court justices visiting Knoxville come out to see you one time? And
They come to see me, but they didn't see me. He's asking if some Supreme Court justices come to see me one time, and they did. I should have told that sooner. Like I told you, I could tell stories all day. But anyway, this man by the name of Foster Arnett, a big-time lawyer in Knoxville, had a cabin up here. And they had a big convention going on in Gatlinburg, and he invited some Supreme Court justices, 2 of them, to have lunch at his cabin, and then come up and meet a real mountain man. Well, here they come, walking up toward my house. I heard them, and I'm used to doing that all the time. I just said, "Who's out there?" And I could hear Foster's big mouth, and I said, "Is that you, Foster Arnett?" "Yes, Uncle Lem, it's me, and I brought 2 famous guests up here to see you." I said, "Is that man from Washington?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "I ain't having nothing to do with him." And I slammed the door and sat back down in his chair. I hear that he got ridiculed about that as much as I did the bear incident. Any other questions?
Did you and your wife have children?
No, we did not have any children. I left my money, and I had more money than most people thought I did because I didn't spend a lot. I left it to the children's home in Nashville because we always loved children so much. Yes, ma'am.
Were you hunting with a rifle?
Yes.
And yet you couldn't really see? How was that?
I could see shapes more than I could see the actual thing. I knew a bear when I saw one, and I knew scat when I felt it hit me. Yes, Butch.
Uncle Lem, in about 1980, wasn't there a young man named Carroll McMahan come up to visit you?
He did. He asked enough stuff that day till he could have wrote a book about me. I hope he did after I was gone. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever carry on any conversation with the AVIT lady?
Yeah, I did. She was a real nice woman. We didn't have a lot to do with each other, but they bought stuff from me. I'd hunt and sell them things. So, yeah, I had a little bit with her. There wasn't anybody that ever come around there long that I didn't have some interaction with. People called me a hermit in my last days, but I wasn't no hermit.
You know what I remember about meeting you? You were my papa's first cousin.
Yeah.
And I asked you, I knew you
You're-
were going blind.
Let's see, your papa was Arthur Watson.
Arthur Watson.
Yeah, he's my first cousin. Had a whole bunch of kids.
Well, I asked you, the apples were ripe, and I said, Uncle Lem, aren't these bears bothering you out here with all these apples? And he said, well, yeah, a little bit, but he said, I just take my gun out and shoot
Yeah.
them. And they're gone.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I got by the lot when the park rangers wasn't around. Trust me.
That's what I know, what you told me.
Anybody else got any questions? Yes, ma'am.
That's so many bear, did you keep the hide?
I usually sold them. I'd keep a few if I needed one for something, but most of the time I sold them. You wouldn't believe what those city folks would give you for one. Okay, well, you know, I go to bed early. When wintertime, I go to bed dark, get up at daylight. So it ain't gonna be long this time of year. So good night and thanks for being here today.